Shh. Hear that? Big waves are calling. Dive into refreshment with Kona Big Wave. Tropical flavor and the taste of aloha in every drop. So crack one open and let the great taste roll in. Kona Big Wave, liquid aloha. Copyright 2025 Kona Brewing Co., St. Louis, Missouri. Mahalo for enjoying responsibly.
Abercrombie denim is everything right now. Denim should feel like this. Confident, easy, like your butt has never looked better. If you didn't know, Abercrombie's Curve Love denim went viral in 2019 for eliminating waist gap, and it's still a game changer. Between that and their classic fits with a straighter line from waist to hip, the perfect denim does exist. Shop Abercrombie denim in the app, online, and in store.
Stuck in a lo-fi loop again? Hit shuffle and refresh the everyday with Mentos Gum. Pop a piece and turn that sleepy soundscape into a dance floor. Freshen up your moves with spearmint. Find freedom with Fresh Mint. Get juicy with red fruit lime and tropical. Or choose a different way to refresh the everyday with your favorite. Mentos Gum. Yes to fresh.
Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Chris Holmes, and this is Burned by Books. Here you'll find interviews with writers you already love, like Jennifer Egan and Rebecca Mackay, mixed in with up-and-coming voices like Alexandra Kleeman and Rumaan Alam. You'll find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but check out previous episodes at burnedbybooks.com and on Instagram and Twitter at burnedbybooks. Let's start the show. Joseph, the narrator of Joseph Earl Thomas's God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer, is constantly looking for the person or place or experience that will hold the earth settled under his feet. He's a veteran of the Iraq War who has returned home to North Philadelphia to work in a hospital that shares too much in common with the chaotic violence and social upheaval of his deployment with the military. There he encounters figures from his past and present who are catalysts to deep thinking about his own family. A chaotic, sometimes unreliable mother and an imprisoned father of whom he knows and understands very little. Joseph begins to confront his desires, complicated, borderless, perhaps queer, and often simply ravenously visceral, while deflecting his ex's constant threats of engaging the family court system to extract more money and to restrict his time and attention to his children. That road to examining his relationship with desire will fling him back into the intense relationships of his combat unit and with his friend Ray, who similarly struggles to integrate his needs and responsibilities into a life that too closely mirrors the frenetic violence of war. Told in a voice that launches the narrative with something like rocket fuel, exploding with intellect and an insatiable desire to describe the world without the veneer of polite society, God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer remakes the great city novel outside of New York and gives us a character who draws together the metaverse of American life. Joseph Earl Thomas is the author of Sink, a memoir longlisted for the Penn Gene Stein Book Award and shortlisted for the Patrick Sarowin International Writing Prize. The novel, God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer, is longlisted for the Carnegie Medal for Literary Excellence, winner of the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and he is author of the forthcoming short story collection, Leviathan Beach. His prose and poetry has been published or is forthcoming in the Kenyon Review, the Paris Review, Harper's, Virginia Quarterly Review, Vanity Fair, the Yale Review, the Massachusetts Review, and Dilettante Army. A graduate of the University of Notre Dame's MFA program in prose, he earned his PhD in English from the University of Pennsylvania. He is a member of the writing faculty at Sarah Lawrence College and teaches courses in Black Studies, poetics, video games, queer theory, and more at the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. Welcome to Burned by Books, Joseph Earl Thomas.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I love this book. I was sort of like from page one, my hair was blown back by how dynamic and just energized the voice of Joseph is and the drive of the narrative, which feels like it has the rhythm and beat of a hospital waiting room. But I want to start with a question that has to do with your hometown and at least peripherally my hometown, Philadelphia. And it feels to me that Philly is a underrepresented city in contemporary American literature. My gut instinct is that it might have to do with the blackness of the city that gets read as either unrepresentable or as failing what is acceptable in the genre of literary fiction. What's your take on the Philly novel, and why does your novel live there in particular?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And that's one of the ways to think about it, right? There's some strange things going on. For one, of course, there's like intensive segregation that is true of a lot of northern cities that we don't necessarily talk about as thoroughly, right? So Philadelphia is one of those cities as well. It's close to New York, but not New York, right? So you have a whole host of investment going to what is already this like kind of well-established genre of thinking about and being and living, working through New York. There are some interesting things happening though, I think, right? So like, I think of things like the voices, the Philadelphia Negro, right? Right now I'm reading David Bradley's first novel, South Street, which is kind of taking me back to think about some of the things of the writing and places. And there's a lot of people, from the city who don't necessarily write about the city directly in that way. But in particular, the kind of thing that I'm interested in, or like forms of difficulty that I'm interested in aesthetically, I think the city lends itself to really well because it also has this, and this is true of my own life and involvement, this triangulation between places like the hospital, the prison, and the military, right? Where it's a recruitment hub still, as lots of places where you kind of regularize and kind of scripted poverty, right? Which is a lot of places where, military recruiter will find themselves. We have a lot of hospitals. We have a huge hospital network. And that's really important for thinking about American healthcare more broadly and what kind of like financial underpinnings of that, of course. And then there's a lot of prison on the other of Philadelphia that don't get talked about a lot in ways that I think are kind of strange. But for me, these are the these are the primary locations in which I myself and people that I knew were interacting with, right? So they were kind of hard to forget and never leaving me. And, part of what I'm interested in is the way it feels to circle through those three kind of major American kind of systems and to talk about them without, a lot of veneer, or like rhetoric. Especially.
Yeah, that you absolutely do that. And I think the way that you describe the sort of like hubs of the hospital and the prison and the military and how those coalesce in this disturbing way is so, just such an important part of the pathos of this novel. The novel is just undeniable as a novel of voice. It's so front forward. From page one, Joseph's narration is a rocket ship. That's best explained, I think, by hearing a little bit of it. Would you mind reading for us just a couple pages from the opening?
Yeah, of course, of course. This is from the beginning. Of all the level 1 trauma centers in one young but very old nation, it's this one. On the north side of a northeastern middling city where we wear teal scrubs stained with shit whips, and this context helps signify the unbearability of true pleasure in the world. Pleasures in feeling purposeful and needed and useful without forcing the disambiguation. The waiting room is full. In a trauma bay, bright lights illuminate the bleached out bloodstains and pennies thrown across the tile floor. A small boy is shot through the thigh again with an AK-47, and next door, a teenage girl from Temple is sexually assaulted. This homeless dude, Greg, who everybody loves to love hate, is beaten to near death outside a gas station by teenagers who are not yet shot through their daddy's deep blue crown zips with AK-47. At Sunoco on Broad and Lehigh, or Hess on Shelburne Ave, or Exxon by the Home Depot where I once worked in the lawn and garden section, and Hector and them waited outside by the truck for gigs, playing ball with every single mom's little kids on that Fisher Price court in front of where Lorenzo and Julia made those banging ass Italian sausages. He started coming here too, Lorenzo, a few years ago after his first heart attack, back when he could walk in without the oxygen tank in tow. There's one boy who, just last week, strolled in, dressed down in all white on his way to the party at Broad and Bad News Champlain, is in need of penicillin again. He's dragged in by a correctional officer, both of them, him and the officer, a girl I went to high school with, rocking late in life Barrette, who every teen and two gym teachers called bad, were both coughing up a lung. Just backstroke spitting on everybody from the waiting room and through the hallway, from the window to the walls and past the egg white cashier counter. All together makes me remember that one time she had burnt our front garden like, my bad, in public to wild laughter that lasted all year. That same year, Sean Paul and Busta Rhymes forever christened the colloquialism for getting burned, and they get clapped, and thus the reclaiming of our 24 point per game averaging stars pride would then take a back seat to a more historically salient reenactment, because too soon after, this white girl at an away game ran around asking everybody on the court and the beaches if she could give them head, and despite our best efforts, he gave them needy. What an obvious mistake. After which she informed her boyfriend down court that our point guard had raped her, thus vanishing our sports star into the system, like my younger brother after he slapped the taste out of the teacher's mouth for choking him one Wednesday afternoon because he was 3 minutes late to his 10th grade social studies class. They both left behind kids and girlfriends, one of whom, Tasha, is a nurse manager now, on her way out the door after a long night shift, reminding me that my scrubs are fucking high waters, bro. And I remind her to mind her fucking business. And she says, I love you too. And I think that's why I'm not watching you badass kids no more. One of whom, when sleeping over, jumped from the top bunk into the ceiling fan at 2:43 a.m., cracking his head open and complaining afterward about his almost but not quite ascension to Miles Morales. So she got a new boyfriend now, who's apparently always dreamed of being a stay-at-home dad type nigga, who I discovered only recently in our last text thread. A video of him, tall, fine, brown, in Reebok slides and every nigga deserves sweater, playing Fallout with the kids in her living room, while she sat back rolling a blunt just outside on the patio. Hummingbirds gathered around her hanging theater in a scene that, if coupled with the right soundtrack, would have made me cry.
Mm. Thank you so much, Joseph. I feel like I have a question lined up about the rhythm and speed there, but I want to pause that for a second just because I'm struck again by, I know how some sitcoms are described as having a joke density. And there's something about this writing that has a kind of observation density in it. There's more observed about society and youth and desire and the prison system and Black life than some books have in, half their, 300-page length. And I wonder how you operate in this kind of realm of density.
Yeah, this is a good question. And thank you for that question. I mean, part of it is trying to catch with thought, which is on one hand a lot of fun, and on the other hand, feels incredibly difficult because the the distance between what you think and your ability to explain it to someone, whether it's on the page or even verbally, just with sound, is so disparate. Like it seems very close, but they're so far away from each other. And a lot of what I am trying to do, or what I ruminate over every day, is how do you, square that circle to some extent, right?
Right.
And and also, right, like it seems to me there's something about what feels close to thought and feeling if you don't express them, or prior to you expressing them, are one of the few things that people can't necessarily take away from you immediately. And so there's like this kind of doubling effect, right? So you have all these thoughts and all these feelings and all these reminiscences and all of this kind of like intensity inside of yourself. And to some degree, you feel a responsibility to express that and to communicate with people, right? This is all about attempting to communicate with people. But, it's greatly limited based on the fact that other people have their own, especially, right, if it's someone with any degree of like neuroses, right, have their own kind of intensities of thought and feeling, and you're trying to figure out ways to meet in the middle. And if I'm trying to write a novel like this, which is kind of maximalist, not necessarily with regard to things being done, but things being thought at the very least, or the way that the pressure to do things gets in the way of being able to think, reflect on those things, experiences. It feels to me like it requires that kind of density, and it still seems, even when I read it now, it still seems inadequate compared to the amount of density in thought that we have going on inside our heads kind of all the time
That's
that we
so
can't
true.
necessarily express to other people, right? And this is part of why, being friends or lovers with someone is so difficult, because we all have, a million things, especially the differentials in our experience, the art that we take in or don't take in, our sets of responsibilities, histories, et cetera, going on. And we're trying to find a way to meet in the middle with that. And a big part of the novel is that frustration. It's trying to meet with that frustration. So it has to have some degree of identity, I think.
I really love that, and it happens to dovetail with one of my main interests in studying literature, which is how we depict thought. And you're so right about that. Like, we fail no matter what to capture just the unbelievable density of in-process thinking before, as you say, it's had a chance to be captured up by something outside of us and maybe disciplined or constrained or whatever happens to it. But connected to that is my question about, there's a speed that goes along with this that I feel like has to do very much with Joseph's work in the hospital and his kind of work with patients and people in trauma. And that brings a kind of explosive speed to the description. And I wonder if you felt that way and if that was something you were trying to cultivate.
Say hello to the new iced horchata shaken espresso from Starbucks. This handcrafted espresso drink with hints of cinnamon and vanilla is shaken with ice and oat milk to create the perfect summer sip. Available for a limited time at Starbucks.
Put us in a box. Go ahead. That just gives us something to break out of. Because the next generation 2025 GMC Terrain Elevation is raising the standard of what comes standard. As far as expectations go, why meet them when you can shatter them? What we choose to challenge, we challenge completely. We are professional grade. Visit gmc.com to learn more.
Yeah, yeah. And this is also a kind of true to listening to people speak. So I was, in life, I was a medic for a really long time. And a lot of what happens in that setting, right, is that you listen to people speak to you or at you a lot, sometimes in groups, sometimes when they're under duress, and I also come from a family of people who speak really quickly and kind of expect you to catch up, right? I also listen to a lot of rap music, and I listen to a lot of music that is in languages that are not my own, right? Japanese and Spanish, which means that a lot of what I get satisfaction from is being overwhelmed with information and catching up piece by piece after the thing has been said. Like, that to me is one of the most satisfying experiences in reading and watching a film that I think is really good. The 15 minutes pass and you come to the realization because the director or the writer or the artist is like letting me catch up with them and not necessarily slowing down for me. That is really exciting for me. That's when I get to feel like I have left the mundane or everyday experience of getting transformed somehow. When I'm like, oh, now I understand the heat of information or this joke, or this reference or something. And I came to it at least halfway with the person who's creating this work. And that is really exciting to me. And so I do try to recreate that. And then I also think about or where I'm told often, right, that sometimes that makes the reading make more difficult. But it's also true that that's the thing that I enjoy the most in all kinds of aesthetics, right?
Yeah, no, I never found, I don't find anything in this book like a difficult reading experience. I just love, as you say, I love like catching up. And that's like a part of the experience. And sometimes you're a little behind and you play catch up. I want to stay with the hospital for a second, and hospital in America as a site of what I would call serious absurdity, in that lives kind of hang in the balance and some are saved and some are lost in the midst of some of the most surreal and sometimes comic human interactions, more bizarre and unexpected than basically anything a writer could have invent whole cloth. It's a concentrated form of society and community. How does a hospital reveal things for Joseph and within the world of the novel about how a society operates despite the chaos and absurdity?
Yeah, there's so much going on, and it's funny when I was finishing this novel, I was looking back over the years at all the different attempts that I had made at writing it, and there was, several other novels worth of pages that were just descriptions of things happening in hospitals or something like that. So on one end for me, the density of it's already a place that's like kind of density rich. It's a place that also requires you to catch up a lot of the time. It's an extremely, like the rest of American society, extremely racist and sexist place, oftentimes, incredibly violent. So interestingly, it's where you go for a kind of healing. So especially, in the context, healing costs money. Everything costs money. There's no alleviating or removing that problem from the equation. But it's especially true that you have this forced mixing of people of different class positions. Sylvia Wynter uses this term classarchy a lot to describe the kind of shifting and changing intermingling of kind of like power hierarchies and the relationship between what happens with regards to the world and even this project, and who gets to be on the kind of out of that process, and how it feels for everyone else to like force their inclusion into that project based on the exclusion of that person. And there a lot of that mingling and changing is going on in the hospital. And it's hard to think of other places where that happens in American life quite consistently.
Yeah.
For example, my job as a teacher, right, as an academic, are mostly I'm teaching people, and my colleagues are people who would otherwise never have any interaction with someone in my family, right? For example, right? Like that distance, or with someone who's been incarcerated for a long time, right? That doesn't typically happen unless it's through like one of these programs that the university starts, and then that in and of itself creates a different kind of relationship. And so the the hospital for me is one of those places where there's the strangeness of forcing people who are from different worlds to interact with each other all the time. And that's with regards to people who work there and with regards to people who end up coming into that station. And it becomes a kind of a communal hub as well. If you work at a hospital long enough, you end up seeing people from the neighborhood over and over again.
Yeah.
If the hospital happens to be in a city that you also live or familiar with, you see those people again. You see the same fire rescue people. It's a very, and those relationships are so incestuous and sometimes comical for that degree of incestuousness that happens with them. I think it is in and of itself a very like information rich or information depth relationship depth kind of place when you sit and pay attention to it.
Have you had a chance to watch this new HBO show, The Pit?
No, I haven't.
It's very good. I don't feel like many people are watching it. I think it's pretty exceptional in terms of it's Noah Wiley, who was, it was basically like playing just an older version of himself from ER, I guess. But it really, really gets it's set in Pittsburgh, and it gets the kind of the urban hospital hub center, not just of the sort of like, emergencies and chaos, but as you say, a community center where you see a lot of the same people. You have relationships with people who live in your area. There's a scene where a guy who used to be a janitorial worker there, but has long since retired, like comes back and sort of pretends that he works there just so that he can have everyday socialization. And I feel like that's
I'll have to see that.
Yeah, I think you'll really like it. And I think that's sometimes missed from hospital dramas or the way we think about hospitals. They are real community centers in a way that American life has kind of stripped out most actual like coming together spaces.
Yeah, obliterated, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for a lot of folks, the little social interaction that you might get could be in that waiting room, right? Or with that one nurse who is nice to you, right? And especially for people who work in hospitals, you become so close with your colleagues because you spend so much time at work. Right? So those relationships form as well. I'm still friends with a lot of people that I work in hospitals with, even after all the time, in part because of the amount of time we spend together and the seriousness and playfulness, the combination of the seriousness and playfulness of the work.
You were talking about how teaching as an academic, that you are teaching people and working with people who in many ways would not have the experience of meeting people in your family or in running in the same kind of networks and circles of people that you grew up with. And Joseph thinks a lot about that as a language issue. And he's a doctoral student at, quote, the university, which I'm just going to state the obvious is a stand-in for Penn, because, Penn, is it still like it's either the biggest employer or the second biggest employer in the city? Is that still true?
I think that's still true. Yeah.
And so, it is really the university. And Joseph feels increasingly like the language that his studies gives him to address powerful questions is the very language that separates him from people in his life who he understands as fully feeling and experiencing the world in a visceral and true way. And that this contradiction is echoed in the hybridity of the language that Joseph narrates the world with in trying to describe all these complicated things in his life. And I was wondering what was powerful for you about employing this kind of like hybridity of language and thinking about how one, lexicon might actually separate you from another.
Yeah. Yeah. This is such a fundamental, in some ways it's a very old question, especially for Black people, right? Which is also mingled in with a kind of, forced amalgamation and trying to make arguments about distinctness, and then when you want the amalgamation, and then when you do, but and it's also a very old question about class in general, right? The sense that you are that one, person, we could fish out in a more aggressive form, who like goes to some university and comes back, whether your nose is turned up or not, it often feels that way to people who did not get the opportunities that you got, right? To leave or to learn in these other ways. I also think one of the things that I've had a lot of difficulty with in writing, especially early on before I got anything published, was when I was sending out essays and stories, and even now sometimes, is register. And the question of like, what register are you trying to be in? Pick one. Like, what is wrong with you? You should pick a register. And I'm kind of like, I don't know how anyone thinks in one register. Who thinks in a single register? I just can't imagine what my life would be like. That's one of the, I guess it would be that kind of terrible version of normal, that version of normal that I really fear, where there's like a one-to-one relationship between like populism and the way you live your life or something like that. But yeah, that seems
oatmeal version.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm like, but I can't imagine living my life on one register. And that's part of what is fun about thinking and writing and feeling too, right? I'm especially interested in when we try to find all these words to describe feelings that we can't accurately describe because they're all overused in like pop songs and stuff. But the pop songs feel good because that's as close as we can get sometimes. And it's also, I also feel this when I am hanging around friends and family, when it's mostly a group of Black folks. There is a kind of normal, to some degree, code switching, but I think to another degree, changing register as well all the time. And it's like kind of the only way that I want to communicate. I don't want to live in a single register. And I feel like there's something really limiting about that. And it's not really something that I aspire to either.
I think that's a QED like absolute point that can't be refuted. It's so much. It's if language is the limitation and the power of our thinking, why would we want one register of it?
Right.
You'd just be saying, okay, put a kind of arbitrary wall between me and a certain kind of thinking. And that's what I get from Joseph's thinking is he can operate in many, many registers, not just two at once, and that he's able to then have a kind of more complicated vision than a lot of people around him. His intellect is clear, but his also willingness to live in those registers is a different kind of choice to be serious about thinking about difficult things, I think.
Yeah, it's funny too, right? Because sometimes the change in register, like you said, it distances you from people, and it often doesn't do anything. doesn't like immediately make something happen, right? Like you get the satisfaction of thinking, which is a satisfaction in itself, but it doesn't always make anything happen, right? So we have to take that seriously.
Yeah. So the irony of North Philadelphia's similarity, at least at the hospital, to his mission in Iraq is not lost on Joseph. It is calamity societally and a black eye on the nation that we often can pinpoint tiny micro localities within major cities in the U.S., many of which are predominantly black, that are allowed or even structured so as to create pockets of intense and pervasive violence. Which is why, when you train as a doctor, you're often training in those hospitals because you'll see things like gunshot wounds and, severe pervasive violence that you learn how to treat. And this irony of it feeling similar in so many ways to Joseph plays out in a way that allows him to understand that there is indeed a great calamity in the way that not cities as a whole, but localities within cities are treated. And can you reflect a little bit on this irony and think about how Joseph's imagining of the small locality of North Philadelphia reads out as kind of America writ large?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a difficult question too, but I actually do like the framing because where we begin is always from such a conservative perspective, usually, which is that, explaining the way that quite clearly white supremacy has shaped these particular locales that happen to be mostly black locales, has basically starved particular locations of resources and then said, well, it's your fault.
Yeah.
There's something so obvious about that happening and how that happened so often that I want to be able to toggle with all the time in a novel like this, right? It's like, to what extent do you explain and to what extent do you describe what is happening? And it's like never ending. Feel kind of never ending. And it's also true that even people who do not say that directly also understand that problem quite clearly, right? And I'm trying to get that across through like kind of everyday interactions where folks have very little time in these spaces to do anything else, whether it's because of the work they need to do or the high level kind of care responsibilities that they have like for themselves and for others, where they're like, yeah, like I know that. However, right now what I need is this food from around the corner and I need you to fix this, put a Band-Aid on this injury so that I can go back to work. How do you stay in that space of contemplation, right? It's like the absolute fury, the mundanity of white supremacy, and the need to physically do things and interact with people in a way that feels helpful, both to yourself and for other people. And I think that's one of the big things that comes up a lot working in the emergency setting, right? The fact that oftentimes, we write and we think about all of these much larger kind of countrywide, global, universal problems, but it doesn't every second of every day feel like you are laying hands on that issue and transforming it, sometimes no matter how hard you try. But what feels different in this setting is that you do sometimes feel like you have done something with your hand or what have you, or even something you said that has made someone's day a little bit better. And I try to think about that in my everyday interactions with people that are far afield from like, online discourse or writing the essay or whatever. I'm like, oh, what are some of the ways that I can still do that in a kind of regular everyday life? And that, I think, what the hospital has taught me, or what I think about in these kinds of relationships.
Your local Benjamin Moore retailer is more than a paint expert. They're someone with paint in their soul, a sixth sense honed over decades. And if you have a question about paint, it's almost as if they can read your mind.
I sense you need a 2-inch angle brush for the trim in your family room. Regal selected an eggshell finish and directions to the post office.
Benjamin Moore paint is only sold at locally owned stores. Benjamin Moore. See the love.
On top of building this fake volcano for months, I give my daughter Smarty Pants vitamins to support her brain health. So her science fair project sounds more like and less like... And while I may say it's not a competition, of course it's a f***ing competition. Choose Smarty Pants vitamins to support your kids' brain health and save the science fair. Shop on Amazon, smartypantsvitamins.com, or at Target today.
I'm going to do a 180 here and talk for a second about sex writing and say that, most sex writing is very bad. See Ian McEwan. But you have like a real knack for it. And I read that as coming out of your desire to make sex immanent in language, to remove the boundaries between bodies and to deal with the true intimacy in its messiest forms, in the uncontrolled mixing that's at the heart of actual physical intimacy. And there's an amazing collision that happens in the novel between Joseph's near fetish for cleaning patients at the hospital, tending their wounds, their messes, their bodies, uncensored and then made for a moment clean, and the experience of sex as this radical, messy interaction of bodies. So take on sex and writing and its messiness for us.
Yeah, I think it's so much fun. Whenever I am one of those people who has a feeling of, if I see something that's not happening, that or a type of thing that's not happening as much aesthetically, or I'm told that I shouldn't be doing something or what have you, I'm like, oh, I should try this. I should practice that and try to get it right as close to that feeling, to the thing that we call reality as maybe we can. So that's so interesting because it is something that we are kind of both over and under invested in a lot of ways. And for me, it's important to try and have that show up on the page. It's also unavoidable if you write about hospital setting as well. It's such a sexually charged environment. So
fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating for a couple. I mean, I'm speaking like from my perspective, right? So there was once upon a time I was an incredibly shy person before the military and the hospital, but then I ended up working in this place with all these like really, for the most part, hyper competent and aggressive women who reminded me of the women that I grew up with, who were also very interested in sex, both its playfulness, its kind of griminess, the excitation that can come with it, the discomfort, the fear. I mean, all of these things together. And that was exciting. And that was very exciting for me. It has been very exciting for me to continue thinking about. And of course, that level of intensity, you get some of that level of intensity when you are constantly touching people, at least at the level of thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you get to fulfill someone else's needs. I mean, at the very least, one part of sex, I mean, if you actually care about it, is fulfilling, is like the excitement of trying to fulfill someone else's needs.
Yeah.
Especially even more than they could have conceived of it, right? Like giving someone more than they could have even thought they wanted, and coming to understand their ecstasy in a real way is so exciting, right? I mean, it's especially exciting because yes, it's true, right? Like outside in the world, things are horrible and incredibly difficult. But as one of the few spaces where we have at least the chance to get a little bit closer to that kind of ecstasy is in these ways. Right? And so, yeah, there is something about doing something for someone that they could not have done by themselves explicitly, and coming to know their pleasure like that. That to me, just as a human being, is really exciting. But it's also interesting to think about the level of writing.
Yeah. And I mean, in a way, once you said it, it feels so intuitive that's like one of the great pleasures, this idea of solving kind of the needs and of somebody else in a way that they might not have ever been able to do for themselves. But I've never heard it quite expressed that way. And I really believe that. And I think that's amazing. And then it ties perfectly with Joseph's kind of real interest in kind of getting into the like nooks and crannies of someone who can't, clean themselves or can't, make themselves, feel full and human by themselves. And yet he can offer that, and that there's something powerful and pretty close to desire about that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like it's similar. It's an extension, I think, of the everyday feeling of, when when you're walking around and you see like an old head struggling to get across the street or to pick something up or whatever, and you're like, oh, this is a really easy thing that I can do for this other person. It's thinking about like, how do you extend that, right?
Mm-hmm. So before I let you go, Joseph, I would love to know a little bit about what you've been reading and loving recently, and if you have any recommendations for my listeners.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's definitely true that I've been reading a lot of stuff for work, right? I mean, how to with teaching, you're rereading a lot of stuff. I've been reading and rereading all of Nell Irvin Painter's work because I'm writing about her right now for UCLA Math. As far as
You have one in
recommendations
particular that you love?
oh yeah, I think Old in Art School is incredible. It's an incredible memoir. But I also really love I Just Keep Talking, which is a kind of set of collected essays, right? From ranging from historical work to biographical, autobiographical work. And it has a lot of her paintings, a lot of her images in it. I think both of those, I think that those are the two most recent and they're both incredible. And then on my list actually is Anna Moskowakis's book. And I know that there was an episode where she was here. And I'm excited to read that one as well. An earthquake is a shaking of the surface of the earth. One that
I title wrong like 6 times when we were talking.
I get the title to the other one wrong all the time. The prior one, which I also love.
Yeah, no, it's also
Whenever I tell people I'll get it wrong and then I have to go back. Yeah. But I love that one. Recent one that I really love, Yoko Sawada's book, Scattered All Over the Earth. Incredible.
I haven't read that one yet.
Book. Oh, it's so good. It's also so funny. Incredibly funny. Yeah, this dystopian novel about this woman who Japan no longer exists, which is a trope in a whole host of Japanese fiction and animated games, etc. in general. But, they call it the land of sushi, and this woman teaches homemade language, and it's basically about like kind of her making friends with people in this context, and it's very strange. Sometimes feels really lighthearted, but also incredibly serious. I love the kind of movement between these incredibly serious moments and the more lighthearted, comforting moment of what feels like true friendship or something. I
And
love
she's
it.
such a probably overused genius, but I mean, she's truly a genius. I mean, operating in so many languages and linguistic registers and writing about translation in every possible meaning of that word. And every time I encounter her, I feel like I'm reading something that's actually unique and doing something new. And this one sounds like it's doing exactly that again.
Yeah, yeah. And it reminds me, there's okay, maybe that's enough recommendation. I have some other books that came to mind, but
No, I mean, recommend away, but
oh, okay, yeah. So another one, Francisco. This is Alison Mills Newman's novel. It is linguistically incredible. There's a foreword in this one by Dia Hartman. That's also really good. And it's a novel about a love relationship, this woman's attachment to this man, Francisco. And the language, when I'm reading it, it reminds me of one of the ways that I'm trying to describe social relations. And it is in a lot of ways, it's stripped of a lot of veneer. It's incredibly funny, right? It's so far away from literary voice, but also so well controlled and invested in the seriousness of what it sounds like for someone to think and talk to and about other people, that it's just really exciting to read. And I haven't read many things like it at all.
Wow, I have to get this novel and
yeah,
have her on.
I'm so interested in these moments where, there's the language sounds and feels like Black folks talking to other Black folks. I felt this way about Gail Jones' book Mosquito. This is, but I haven't really wrong one that read that either. I think. Also incredible kind of, and it has all of those investments in, for example, what is the process of thinking like, and how far can you expand out ideas, and what it's like to think alongside other people and about your friends, and the difference between thinking and dialogue and where those things fail. It's also based around relationship, but it's also really, really invested in friendship and several friendships with different kinds of people and different locales. So mosquitoes about this black woman who's a truck driver. So it feels kind of like a road novel, but it also feels like a lot of it is happening within her head too. Also a very, very kind of incredible and super experimental book too, as it goes on.
Wow, it sounds unbelievable. I really have to read it.
Yeah.
Well, these recommendations are amazing and so varied, and that only is fitting with one of the most kind of unique and varied and engaging and gripping and beautiful and complicated novels that I've read in a while. God bless you, Otis Spunkmeyer. And it was an absolute pleasure to talk to you about it, Joseph.
Thank you, Chris. It was great too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, that's all from me for now. My thanks to Joseph Earl Thomas for coming on to talk about his debut, God Bless You, Otis Spunkmeyer. You can find links to purchase that novel and all of Joseph's recommended books at the website, burnedbybooks.com. There you'll find all of our previous episodes, links to buy a podcast t-shirt, and ways to get in contact. As you listen, take a moment to rate the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Until next time, this has been Burned by Books.